Recently, we talked about the whole situation with Ubisoft, Assassin's Creed, Splinter Cell, and more games that are having their online services terminated on September 1st of this year, which is just about less than a week away, I believe, now when I'm recording this. My allergies are terrible, so I'm going to do my best to power through this video, but if you enjoy this, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe. We are going to talk more about this situation, some updates, and some thoughts that we received as well. I was shocked at how well that video did and how much people did seem to care. Now, there will always be corporate shills who defend anything that a company does because they love their Lord and Savior big money company, but I do think that overall, the response to this video was very positive, and a lot of people are very much against what Ubisoft is doing. Now, I think a lot of people also, though, however, have confused in their heads, because they didn't listen to the whole video, something that I talked about, which was when it is something you don't care about, this doesn't seem like a big deal to you. Servers shutting down, things going away, stuff like that, it just doesn't matter to you, right? It's not a property you care about. Well, then, of course, it's not going to matter to you. But when it hits something that people care about, they always talk about it. Now, I'm guilty of this too. Something like Destiny 2 has had a lot of its content stripped, but because I don't talk about Destiny on this channel, I did way back when the first game launched, it's something I never really covered or talked about because I'm not really interested in Destiny. However, I think the difference is I can admit that that's stupid and shitty, right? There were a lot of people who also wanted to defend Ubisoft's actions. The idea that, well, all servers go offline eventually, so it's okay. Even if we accept that for multiplayer servers, which I do understand there is technically a shelf life on, it has been getting more and more ridiculous in recent years with companies, how quickly they are willing to terminate their services and bail. Like, just completely abandon ship if it's not immediately profitable. Look at things like Anthem, where it's pretty much just abandoned by EA. Look at other things like the sports games. It's not just EA, by the way. It's also companies like 2K, obviously Rockstar, which has pretty much dumped Red Dead Online, at least for the time being. A lot of the problem I have with these things, though, is not just multiplayer. I think a lot of people are confusing it, where it's like, well, multiplayer will always have a shelf life. That's the idea. You get over it. Well, first off, it's not actually. The reason that people have embraced that is just because these companies are too cheap to keep the servers up. If you look at a company like Activision, I'm not saying that they maintain their servers or do a good job anywhere else. You can go back and play Call of Duty 4 on the Xbox 360, on the PS3. The servers are still up. Now, there's hackers on it. It's trash. I'm not saying do it. But what I'm saying is the cost to keep these things up is actually not as much as you would think, especially because these companies are rolling in money. Look at how much the CEO of Ubisoft is paid yearly, then come back and tell me they can't afford to keep those servers open. All it comes down to is basically selfishness. It comes down to corporate greed and trying to cut you out of stuff. Now, it doesn't just end there, and I think a lot of people didn't listen to the full video who thought it did, because one thing we talked about in that video is that it is not just multiplayer content. Even if you don't care about Assassin's Creed multiplayer, even if you don't care about multiplayer at all, even if you don't care about any of that stuff, there were a lot of content items in the original Assassin's Creed games locked behind things like Uplay and other stuff that eventually they've even admitted is going to be inaccessible. This isn't just these exclusive items, though, like knife belt upgrades or pouch upgrades and stuff like that. It also goes down to things like actual DLC content, especially on the PC version where the entire DLC library of the Tyranny of King Washington on Assassin's Creed 3 is going to be totally unavailable. A lot of those Uplay specific items are also not going to be able to be obtained in the future if you're still playing on an old console, and it just happens to be, and an interesting little fact that I think I neglected to mention last time, the remasters, the re-releases, they have none of these problems. I don't think a lot of people really thought about that. I think a lot of people thought about how, well, it makes sense. Like, eventually they'll ditch those servers, they'll ditch that content. It's Xbox 360, Jay, it's PS3. What do you expect? Ignoring the PC thing, which will always be a modern platform, but the game's old. What do you expect? You know, who cares about the multiplayer? Okay, fine, sure, let's concede that. What about the single-player items? What about the fact that you're not getting access to a lot of that single-player DLC on those original games? And to clear up confusion for people, again, it is not a problem in the re-releases, in the remasters. It's not a problem there. it's not going to be an issue with getting to that DLC content. If you have something like Assassin's Creed 3 Remastered, if you have the Ezio collection, you have access to all this stuff on modern tech, right? But it just so happens that they're kneecapping the old version. They're kneecapping the version of these games that old fans are into. And there's been a lot of people who have pointed this out. I am a fan of Assassin's Creed in general, okay? I'm a fan of Splinter Cell in general. I even liked Conviction. I'll be honest with you, on Splinter Cell, I enjoyed Conviction. Was it as good as Classic? No, but I liked it still. And when it comes to Assassin's Creed, I'm kind of in the same boat. I still like modern Assassin's Creed. A lot of people hate on me for it. You can keep doing it. That's fine. I'm still going to like it. I like a lot of these characters, like Cassandra and others, you know, and I really do enjoy the game still. But I think a lot of people kind of pointed out, like, something interesting to me, which is that there is a split and division in the fans. There are people like me who have enjoyed both the classic and modern style of games, but who are still pissed off at the idea of calling it legacy titles and stuff like that. I don't like that. I think you can do both. There are people who only like the classic, and then there are actually a lot of people who got into Assassin's Creed with the modern day releases of the RPG. So it's a weird fan base, especially compared to something like Splinter Cell or other Ubisoft titles, because it went through such a shift. Yes, a lot of the fundamentals are still there that people neglect to mention who do hate on the new style. The climbing is still there. You have a lot of stuff with viewpoints. You have a lot of elements with the Assassins and Templar lore. Even if you want to say, like, the hidden ones aren't really them, they are. It's just a different name, earlier time period. But when you actually get into it, a lot of fundamentals are there. It's just gameplay mechanics and the overall style and flow of the game has changed from a more, not linear, but free-flowing experience in a free-roaming world to a RPG experience where you have to level up, do this and that. I know a lot of people don't connect with that, but the point that I'm getting to is this schism with fans does exist, even though there are people like me who like both. When it comes down to it, one group of people they have not been able to appease in recent years is the original fans. And by the way, that's their fault. It's not the fault of the fans if they don't connect with the RPG elements and stuff. Now, I will say I do think they're overhated, and I can defend those in some ways. That's in a different part of a different conversation, I'm sure. But it's worth noting that Ubisoft does have sort of a obligation, if they want the money of the classic fans, to appease them, to give them something they want. This is something I've talked about before 100 times. There's easy ways to do this. They don't even involve not releasing the RPG titles. You can keep doing that. You can also release the classic titles. You can release things like a Assassin's Creed 3 sequel with the original gameplay style of the game. You can release things like an Assassin's Creed 4 spiritual successor. No, not Skull and Bones, and I know they did Rogue, but something now coming out with that sort of classic Assassin's Creed gameplay, but, you know, with those elements that they love from the past and maybe modern technology. You wouldn't have to do a RPG pirate Assassin's game. You do an Assassin's Creed game that is sort of based on 4. Things like that. The original style, bring it back. That's what I'm saying. You can do the other one too. Have you noticed, though, that this move directly impacts the original fans of this series? That's something that really annoyed me that I didn't think about directly, but if you think about it, this is directly pushing those original fans to buy the new re-releases of the games instead of be happy with what they had. Now, I know there are arguments of, well, they're better anyway, they have better frame rate, they're more stable, you have access to all the content, blah, blah, blah. Sure, fine. I agree with you in a lot of ways. I love the FPS boosted versions of, like, the Ezio trilogy and Assassin's Creed 3 on Xbox Series X. I'm with you there in terms of the tech being better. However, if you want to play this game on an old system or old hardware, or you owned it on PC and you just want to play your original title, that should be your right. You paid for it. You do understand, I think some of the people defending this action just latched onto the multiplayer component because there's so much hatred for multiplayer in the single player community. I've never understood it. You don't have to interact with it if you don't like it. Nobody's forcing you to at gunpoint, but it's weird to me because a lot of people, like, they get in a circle jerk about it, like, Assassin's Creed never should have had multiplayer anyway. I'm glad it's dying. Oh, yeah. And then their friend will kind of come in like, oh, yeah. Fuck anybody who liked that. Oh, they suck. You know, and stuff like that. And it's like, Well, that's not really the point, because even if we did all agree to that, like I said, this is also affecting the content that you care about, that single player stuff. Now, I know that corporate shills will always be ready to jump in front of a bullet for their overlord and defend them. A friend of mine on Twitter actually called them Ubisofties, which I thought was really funny, where essentially if you say anything bad about Ubisoft, they rush in to defend their masters and just jump in the way of a speeding freight train to be like, no, wait, please, pick me, see me. But despite the fact that I'm a huge fan of the games, I think a lot of people miss the fact that, one, if you never call these companies out on anything, nothing will ever change. And two, brand loyalty is a cancer. And now people can say the same thing about me. I saw this where it was like, well, you're the one buying the games new and doing this and that. And it's interesting because I don't remember ever saying I did. I actually looked back through my Assassin's Creed games. I have never paid full price for an Assassin's Creed title since 4. I looked back at it. And I realized, oh, I bought almost all of these either used or new from an eBay seller for like $10. I'm being serious. Like, even the re-releases, I bought them all used or at like $10 a piece new. Now, I know that to Ubisoft, that means I have less of an opinion because I'm not a paying customer who gets their day one. I'm also not a pirate, though. I did buy these games, and I was actually excited to keep buying the games in the series. And you know what? I will be fully transparent and honest with you. I'd like to keep playing the games in the series. I actually would. And I know that pisses some people off because they want me to just drop them and never talk about them. But if I don't play these games and experience them and talk about them and stuff, I feel like I'm missing out because I enjoy the Assassins and Templars stories. I enjoy the worlds. I enjoy the characters. I enjoy the things that the developers make, the developers. And I think a lot of people confuse the developers with the corporate overlords. Just because the corporate overlords are pieces of shit in a lot of these companies doesn't mean that I necessarily don't want to experience what the game devs are making. Doesn't mean I don't necessarily want to enjoy that world or have fun or, experience it and interact with it. Now, I can't control what anyone else does. I know a lot of people said that from here on out, they're not going to play their games or they're going to pirate their games or whatever. I will never advocate what you do with your money on this channel. I will tell you what I think, what I would do, and what I think sends a message or does this or that, but I will never tell you, hey, you need to spend your money this way, otherwise jump off a bridge, kick rocks, whatever, you're the problem. It's not really about that for me. Even when it comes to things like GTA Online, the fact that players buy shark cards isn't really the problem to me as much as the fact that that economy was ever created. Now, I know that if players just stopped buying them, they would probably go away. Actually, they wouldn't. They'd probably just shut down GTA Online because Rockstar sucks. But I think that it's interesting to note that I don't blame players for a lot of this stuff. I don't blame the developers for a lot of this stuff. There's all this rhetoric about lazy developers and stupid players who buy into this stuff. But who introduced the system? Who gets you hooked? Who's holding the needle? Who's pushing the drugs to you, essentially, in a lot of ways? Because when we look at this, these microtransactions, these things that have led the games to become the way they have, the acceptance of things shutting down, they're beyond one person. They're beyond one idea or one paying customer. And what they go back to is an attitude of corporate greed at the top that works its way down with an iron hand, basically an iron fist. You get in line or you get out of the way. It's not like the Ubisoft developers themselves can straight up commit a mutiny and go into the offices of the higher ups with chainsaws and swords and tell them to stand down and we're taking over. It's not really a situation like that. It's people are at the top commanding what to do and it trickles down. Now, I completely understand if people don't want to support these games at full price. Full honesty, I don't really think I do, but I also haven't in a lot of years because of problems I've had with it. Now, I'm going to keep enjoying these games and making content on them and talking about them and enjoying that with the community here, and I understand some people will hate me for that, say I'm part of the problem because I play their games and this and that. I don't really care. To me, a lot of this stuff comes from the top. And that's kind of where a lot of the changes need to be made. But I think players do need to call these things out. If you are against microtransactions and you are spending hundreds of dollars a month on them, that sends the message that you like them, that you are totally fine with them. Now, I'm not going to tell you what to do with your money. I'm not. It's not my money. But for me, I know that a lot of times I try and limit that kind of stuff. I try and be like, I'm not going to support these practices that I'm against. When it comes to these games, when I'm already not paying full price for them and I'm just getting them secondhand, it doesn't really matter to me because I can call that kind of stuff out, write the game off as a tax write-off because I'm literally buying it for work, and then move on. A lot of people have to make their own decisions in terms of what they want to do with this stuff, and I respect those decisions. I respect whatever you want to do. But I think that the sort of weird attitude that I've seen some people do of like trying to defend the actions, trying to defend the shutdowns, trying to defend the fact that they are kneecapping the original games and making it for original players so that those game experiences are worse, I think that's very misguided and sad. It's just another in a long line of Ubisoft kind of aiming a figurative gun back at their old fan base that got them where they are. I really don't understand why they're doing this. I do. It's money and it's to try and push the re-releases and get some sales off that. But what's weird about it to me is that those re-releases are old now. They're all sold for like $20 or less at Walmart, at Target. Or if you want to find a good-looking copy of it, you're probably going to go to eBay and buy it from a secondhand seller for $15, $20. Ubisoft's not even directly getting a lot of that money anymore, unless there's a huge bump in sales like we saw with Skate 3 and PewDiePie, where everybody rushes out to get it. Then I guess they would see that revenue stream. Unless we see something like that, it's just a weird situation that it seems like it's trying to push people towards the re-releases and the modern RPG era instead of enjoying their original copies. I'm not a fan of that kind of thing. I really do believe in game preservation as much as possible. I'm glad that there are a community of people who's trying to make servers for the multiplayer now. There is an Assassin's Creed Revival Discord that's pretty public and easy to find. But, you know, there's a lot of stuff like that that is going on with fans who want to preserve these experiences and preserve these things, but I don't think it should fall on fans to have to do that, and I don't think people should be falling on the sword to defend them. Now, I'm not sure if this was just kind of a random talk or if it had a real point. I tried to kind of make some points in here, but you'll have to let me know what you think in the comments down below. I'm interested to hear your thoughts. What do you think about the title Ubisofties? I think that was a pretty good one from my buddy Ellie over on Twitter. I tried Ubicucks. It flows off the tongue when you're mad, but like it's a little distasteful compared to Ubisofties. I think like Ubicucks is like the hard vodka of the insult, but Ubisofties is like the spritz. You know, it's like the light wine or the wine cooler. It's velvety and it's still insulting and it works well. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Please be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content. I am still going to be covering Assassin's Creed. I am still going to be playing the games. I am still going to be having a fun time with them here, whether people, you know, are against that or not. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope that you are willing to say something when you disagree with things that are going on. You do have the right to speak your mind. You have the right to spend your money however you want, and I respect that. Have a fantastic day, and as always, everyone, stay shui.